In today's lesson, we will be looking at the Chicano rights movement from the years 1955 through the years 1975. The lesson objective is to examine the causes and effects of the Chicano rights movement. In this lesson, we will examine the causes of the Chicano rights movement and look at examples of radical action, coalition building, and legal action in the Chicano rights movement. First, some vocab. So, Chicano is a term used by many Mexican Americans to identify themselves. Is it also sometimes spelled Chicano to make use of the X as a ch sound, which is something that is native to the Western Hemisphere? The Chicano rights movement. Following the Mexican-American War and the additions of California, Texas, and other formerly Mexican land to the U.S., tensions were created between the families who had lived on the land for generations and newcomers. If you look at the map on the right, all of the land in green and that little bit of purple on the bottom of the United States is land that used to be part of Mexico. A lot of the families who lived on that land stayed on that land after it changed from Mexico to the United States. In the 1960s, Mexican-American families started to fight discrimination they experienced at the hands of white Americans. The sign on the right is a perfect example of that discrimination. It says we serve whites only, no Spanish or Mexicans. This fight was called the Chicano movement. Farm workers led by Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta staged strikes to improve working conditions in the field. Their group was called the United Farm Workers. They hoped that these strikes would build a coalition of people who would be working to improve farm workers' lives, many of whom were Mexican Americans. At this time, it was illegal for students to speak Spanish in public schools. Students could be hit for speaking Spanish. On the right, you see a picture of someone picking up a paddle with the words underneath, "If it's not worth saying in English, it's not worth saying at all." This is something that existed in public schools in Los Angeles at the time. In 1968, high school students engaged in a radical action. High school students in East LA walked out of schools and refused to return unless the schools changed their racist rules. This was called the East LA walkouts or the Chicano blowouts. The protests led to limited legal reforms in the state of California. In 1963, aid to families with dependent children was extended to farm workers, and in 1975, the California Agriculture-Labor Relations Act was passed. These legal actions helped address some of the complaints of the Chicano rights movement. These are the sources I used for this video. I would really encourage you to check out the video source I used here. It does a great job of going over the East LA student walkout.